Welcome to your third violin lesson. So in this lesson, I'm going to teach you how to make a nice sound on the violin with your bow. And after the lesson, I will show you some bowing exercises that you can do to reinforce the things I'm about to teach you. So I want to show you the basic bow movement of your arm. So I'm going to try to explain this without a bow first, and then I'll show you what that would look like with the bow. So when you're moving down with your bow, that's called a down bow. And when you move up with your bow, that's called an up bow. So when I'm going down bow, I'm going to be straightening out my elbow and also pushing out with my wrist. When I go up bow, my elbow is bending, but also my wrist is bending inwards. What you should try to think about is where your wrist is moving more than any of this other stuff. As much as possible, try not to shrug your shoulders, okay? Because that's going to put a lot of strain on your body and it's not good. So generally, you just want to be relaxed here and just move your arm like that. Now let me show you with the violin. So with playing a nice sound on the violin, I like to break it down into 4 different elements. The first one being bow placement, where you place your bow on the violin. Second is string level, so making sure that your arm is in the right string level when you play those notes. Third is bow speed. Fourth is bow weight. Bow speed and bow weight go together. I'll explain how that works later. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Bow placement. So with bow placement, you want to make sure that it's between this bridge. This is the bridge. And your fingerboard. Everything here is the fingerboard. So you want to place and play your bow in the middle of those 2 sections. And then another thing is to make sure that your bow is parallel to the bridge. Let me demonstrate. That's what I mean. So playing parallel to the bridge and playing in the middle of the violin. But I would say the most effective way to kind of get really good at this is to play in front of a mirror or record yourself or have someone to tell you whenever you're not playing in the middle of the violin. So that's where having a teacher comes in handy. That was bow placement. The next is string level. So with string level, there's a different level that your arm goes to. So this would be the G level, the G string level. If you're playing on the D string, this is the D string level, A and E. So some things to point out is that I'm pivoting from my shoulder here, my bow arm shoulder. I'm not pivoting from my elbow. My entire arm moves to each of the different string levels. Next is bow speed and bow weight. A general rule is if you want to play loud, you use more weight and more speed. If you want to play softly, less weight, less speed. So let me show you what that might sound like. So this is be loud. A lot of weight, a lot of speed. So to play softly, you want to use less speed and less weight. You might have noticed something that I was doing. So when I played loud, I actually changed where my bow placement was. So I actually played closer to the bridge with more weight and more speed. And then when I played softer, you can notice that I tilted my bow this way. Less of the horsehair grips the string. And I changed my bow placement to be closer to the fingerboard. So I wanted to elaborate a little bit what I meant by putting more weight into your bow. So putting more weight into your bow can only be achieved by relaxing your arm. So opposed to relaxing your arm, what would be the wrong way to do this is pushing your arm into the bow to create more pressure. So visually, your elbow should not be higher than your bow, but it should be actually along the same plane as where your bow is. So in other words, you're using gravity to help you put more pressure onto your bow to be able to create more weight. Now that we've learned how to make a nice sound and use our bow, let's do some bowing exercises to reinforce what we just learned. So I'm using these exercises from the Suzuki Violin School book, Volume 1. Okay, so if you should have one of these already if you've been following along from lesson 1. I'm going to I'm going to reference this, and I want you to look at this as we go through this next section, because it's going to be, I'm going to follow this to the T, okay? All right. So if you're following along, this is on page 21. That's in my version. If it doesn't look like that on page 21 for you, find the page that looks like this. What we're going to do is play 5 different rhythms, okay? It's marked by the letters A, B, C, D, and E on the top. And right under that is another A section. That's what I'm going to show you today, okay? That's what we're going to practice on, and I'm going to give you homework after this for you to practice on your own. So make sure you're paying attention, okay? I'm going to show you the rhythm of the A section so that you know what it sounds like, okay? Ready? T T T T ta ta rest rest. T T T T ta ta rest. Repeat. T T T T ta ta rest rest. T T T T ta ta rest rest. And T T T T ta ta. 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 Okay. You might be confused at what you just heard there, but let me explain. So these are called 16th notes. These are called 8th notes. So for every beat, which is what I've been snapping. So if you're ever listening to a song and you're tapping your foot to it, you're probably tapping to the beat, okay? So there's 4 of these in the beat. There's 2 of these in the beat. Rest, a quarter, this is called a quarter rest. That is 1 beat of rest. So 1 entire beat of silence. What you're seeing here, these symbols on top, the one that looks like a staple is it called a down bow. The one that looks like a V is called an up bow. So on your bow, you would be doing a down, up, down, up, down, up for the rhythm. That little dot above the 8th note that you're seeing is called staccato. Staccato is basically a bowing technique where you just stop the bow abruptly to get a certain kind of effect. That was like the worst explanation ever. I'll play it for you so you'll know what it sounds like, okay? And then if you go a little bit further along, you'll see this little bar here, this with 2 dots on each side. That's called a repeat sign. It's in the name. You repeat the section before it all the way to the beginning here, and then you play through it if you get to it the second time. And then if you're in a situation where there's repeat signs on both sides, so you play this to the end here and repeat back to the last point where you see the repeat sign, and then you end. Okay. Now let me play it for you on my violin. Okay, I'm going to play on my E string. It's going to be a little bit high pitched. So in the middle of the bow, or just a little bit under, I'm going to start from here. Okay, ready, go. Rest, 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 repeat. Rest, 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 and okay, that's how it sounds like. So that's the A rhythm. Let me go over the B rhythm. For the B rhythm, what you're seeing here is 2 8th notes, an 8th rest, and an 8th note. So the rhythm for that sounds like this. Ta, ta, ta. Let me play it for you. Ready, go. Rest, 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 rest. Repeat. Rest, 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 rest. Repeat. That's the B rhythm. The C rhythm. Okay, this one is a little different too. So this is what it's going to sound like. Rest, 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 repeat, and rest, 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 and repeat. So we were introduced to 16th notes and 8th notes, but we're now being introduced to a different rhythm called a triplet. A triplet is 3 notes in one beat. So da 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 da. Okay. Here's the D rhythm. Ready? Go. Rest, 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 rest. Repeat. Rest, 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 and okay. Now the E rhythm. So this is just straight 16th notes for 2 beats. Let me show you how to play that. Rest, rest. 1, 2, 3, 4. Rest. Repeat. And rest, rest. Rest, rest. Keep going. Repeat. 1, 2, 3. All right, that's the E rhythm. Now that's a lot. Hopefully that wasn't too boring for you, but I have some homework for you, okay? So for this A rhythm that we went over, the T, 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 ta, ta, you're gonna do this here, what we just played, on the E string, on the A string, on the D string, and on the G string. All right, and then for the B rhythm that we talked about, you're gonna do that also on the E string, A string, E, D string, G string. Same thing for the C, same thing for the D, same thing for the E rhythm. So the idea is to practice this for about a week. Don't practice this for a year, okay? Like that's too much. But just practice this for at least a week to get used to using your bow and the different rhythms and maybe even reading the music. I gave you a lot to think about. I gave you a lot of things to practice. So go and practice it, and I'll see you in the next video.